So I was reading this fascinating essay recently, and it makes a pretty bold claim. It argues that the biggest threat to America today isn't some foreign power, but something coming from inside. The whole piece is framed as this race against time, a race against self-destruction, with roots that go way, way deeper than just politics. And this is the line that kicks the whole thing off. It's a striking metaphor from way back in the 13th century. The idea is that a lion, the king of the jungle, is too powerful to be taken down by anything on the outside. The only thing that can truly destroy it is something that grows from within. This is the lens the author uses to look at everything that's happening right now. All right, so here's our roadmap. We're going to follow the author's logic piece by piece. First, we'll unpack that lion and worms metaphor. Then we'll look at what they call the Trojan horse strategy that kicked all this off. We'll get into the staggering financial and social costs, and then dig into a deeper diagnosis before we finally see what the author suggests is the only way forward. So let's start with that core metaphor. If America is the lion, then what exactly are the worms? According to this analysis, it's not another country or an external enemy. It's a set of destructive internal forces that have been talked about in philosophy for thousands of years. The essay puts a name to these worms, the three poisons from Buddhist philosophy: greed, hatred, and delusion. But here's the crucial twist in the argument. This isn't about individual people being greedy or hateful. The claim is that these poisons have been woven into the very fabric of our systems, our economy, our media, our institutions on a massive civilizational scale. Okay, so if these poisons were kind of always there, simmering under the surface, what lit the fuse? What activated them in such a huge way? The analysis points to a very specific event, a strategy that wasn't designed to win a war, but to trick the lion into eating itself alive. And here's the core thesis. The 9/11 attacks were not a military move. They were a psychological one. The author argues that bin Laden knew he could never, ever win a straight-up fight. So the goal wasn't to defeat America by force. The goal was to provoke a massive, panicked, self-destructive overreaction. It was bait. And you don't have to guess. This quote from bin Laden himself lays it out plain as day. The strategy was explicitly financial. The plan was literally to bleed America to the point of bankruptcy by exploiting its own predictable reactions. So the big question is, did it work? Well, this essay argues that it worked spectacularly, and the first place we can see the results is in the absolutely staggering financial cost, the bleed until bankruptcy plan in action. Let's just start with this number. $38.56 trillion. That's the current U.S. national debt. It's a number so huge, it's almost meaningless. Until you break it down like this. That's the share of the debt for every single person in the country. Suddenly that abstract, astronomical number feels, well, pretty personal, right? And here's the really scary part. It's not a static number. It's growing by over $6 billion every single day. The author points out that the U.S. is now racking up $1 trillion in new debt about every 100 days. It's an accelerating crisis. And just to put that spending into perspective, check this out. In 2024, U.S. military spending was more than the next 9 biggest spending countries combined. This is presented as Exhibit A for the massive overreaction that the attackers were banking on. And all of that spending led to this: a jaw-dropping tipping point. In 2024, for the very first time, the money America spent just on interest payments for its debt was more than its entire massive military budget. The author flags this as a huge sign of deep structural decay, a major milestone for the bleed until bankruptcy plan. But the damage goes so much deeper than just money. The essay argues that nearly a quarter-century of nonstop war has left these deep, deep wounds on the nation's psyche and its social fabric. So how did that happen? Well, this timeline lays out the author's case for how public trust was systematically dismantled. From the justifications for going to war, to the revelations about mass surveillance, to proof of official lies, the argument is that the basic trust you need for democracy to even work has been chipped away year after year. So the legacy of this whole era runs deep. It's not just about the money. It's about a generation of veterans with physical and moral injuries. It's about mass surveillance becoming normal, police becoming more militarized, and maybe most corrosive of all, a fundamental distrust in the country's own institutions. Okay, so the analysis goes even deeper. It identifies two powerful forces that have been acting like jet fuel on this fire: the very design of social media and a level of economic inequality that is just off the charts. This is a pretty provocative metaphor, right? The author argues that a nuclear bomb destroys a city, but social media destroys something even more fundamental: our shared sense of reality. It leaves us in a place where we can't even agree on basic facts, which makes solving problems together basically impossible. And the author is quick to point out this isn't just some dramatic idea. There is a mountain of academic research showing that social media's business model is literally designed to reward outrage. It fuels division, it destroys trust, and studies show it hits established democracies the hardest. The second amplifier, according to the essay, is economic. Just look at this table. It's a stark comparison between the nation's founding and today. The point here is simple. When the top 1% has more wealth than the bottom 50% combined, the whole idea of a shared American dream, the foundation of a healthy democracy, just starts to fall apart. So, after that pretty grim diagnosis, where do we go from here? The essay's conclusion is that this crisis is not fundamentally political, it's spiritual. And that means political solutions by themselves just aren't going to cut it anymore. So here's the final argument broken down. The crisis is one of consciousness, not just policy. The root causes are those three poisons we talked about. And because the political process itself is now infected with those poisons, you can't use that same broken process to fix the problem. Therefore, the only real path forward, the author concludes, isn't a new law or a new president. It's a fundamental transformation of consciousness, happening one person at a time. And that leads to the final call to action. It isn't some grand plan to organize a movement. It's something much simpler, much more personal, and much more immediate. The author's last word on the subject is simply begin. It's a call for each person to start that inner work of fighting their own greed, hatred, and delusion right now. And so we're left with this final, massive question. The author frames our situation as a race. On one side, you have the algorithmic speed of self-destruction. On the other, the slow, quiet, deliberate pace of human awakening. Is it even possible for one to outrun the other? The essay doesn't give an easy answer. It just leaves that question hanging in the air for us to think about.